In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create a table runner with vintage linens. Hi, I'm Kim Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts, and I have a lot of vintage linens, and I have really a lot of vintage doilies, and I love them. They're beautiful. I never know what to do with them, but I found a way to use them and to really highlight them too, and that is to put them on a table runner. Now, you could create your own table runner if you wanted to, but why go to all that trouble when it's a lot easier to go to Ikea and buy one? And that's what I did. So this is what I created using a table runner that I bought from Ikea, which is what you see as the background here, and some of my vintage doilies. So let's start at the beginning and talk about the table runner I got from Ikea. Okay, I'm just going to move this over to the side. So this is the table runner, and it's called Svartsnap. Okay, that's my best Swedish. It's probably not even close to what it's actually pronounced, but that's what it is. So you can see it there, and it's actually 14 inches by 51 inches, or if you're on the metric system like I am, 35 by 130 centimeters. So it's a good long length, which I like in a table runner too, because sometimes they're not that long and I want them to go, across the table. And it comes in different colors, which is cool too, right? So there's that kind of black gray color. There's, a cream or natural color. And then sometimes you might be lucky enough to find this gorgeous turquoise color. Last time I was in, they were out of these, but I had snagged this a while ago, so I have it in my stash. So I've got that table runner. Now, where are your doilies? Well, I don't know where you keep yours. Mine are in Trofast units from Ikea actually too. And so here's a sample of some of the different doilies that I have. And you can see, different sizes. Some are bigger, some are smaller, even some different colors on these, right? So I have to decide what I want to put on my table runner, and even more difficult, how to attach them so that I can watch that table runner so they're not going to come off, all right? So let's move this one out of the way a little bit, and let's take the same color here. Let's open this up here. So the way I did it is probably going to be totally different than the way you might want to do it, but I kind of wanted to have something that was a little bit bigger in the center and then have other doilies around it. If you want to do something totally different than that, you might have a set of doilies that are the same size, like these. I have 4 of these. So you might want to just, space them out along the doily. And if you want to do something like that, you can either eyeball it, which I often do, and I'm usually pretty darn close as to the spacing, or, if you had 4 of those, you could fold your table runner in half, give it a little bit of a press, fold it in half again, another press, and you're going to get some lines in there that will help you to orient those doilies. You can also just be kind of random with them if you want, and just kind of, throw them all over the place, but that's probably not going to work as well, right? But if you have different sizes, much as I did in my sample, you might want to have a doily. Let's say if we went with these 4 again, let me go back here. You might want to put down a bigger doily and then kind of surround it with some smaller ones, for example, and you might continue on, right? Doing something like this. Depends on the number of doilies you want, whether that's going to work or not, right? It might work or you might not have enough. In my case, I think I'm like 1 short. I must have another one of these somewhere, I'm sure. But you get the idea, right? So first thing you want to do is play with the doilies, right? Play with the arrangement. See what you want to do. And as I said, you can always fold your table runner and press it to give you markings. You can measure with a ruler if you want to have a certain amount of spacing between doilies, if you're adding a whole bunch to it, whatever you want to do there. But the really important thing is to make sure that they are stitched down so that they're not going to come off when you wash them. And I thought about how to do this. First off, I did not want to hand stitch them down. That was the first thing. That was a very easy decision to make, okay? But I thought, how am I going to use my sewing machine then? Because that was my next thing, right, that I could do. How am I going to use that to stitch down a doily like this, for example? Well, maybe a zigzag stitch, but there was a couple things I wanted to think about. First off, I wanted to think about the thread I was going to use as far as color, first off, and I decided to just use a 100% cotton thread. You could use polyester if you wanted to as well, but I did use 100% cotton, and I decided to match the thread to the color as close as I could, the color of the doily, because I didn't want it to show, right? So I want the stitches to be fairly invisible. I also, of course, want them to be very secure, and they had to be just little stitches then. If I wanted them to be invisible, they had to be very small, right? If I did a big zigzag stitch, you know, that's going in the background, you're going to see it a lot, and I didn't want to do that. If you take a closer look at the ones I have here, it's pretty hard to see the stitches, I think, until you flip it over, and you can see them on the back. And there's a lot of stitches, okay? So this may take a little bit of time, but it was easier than hand stitching and much more secure as well. So I want to take you over to my Janome CM17 and explain to you the stitch I decided to use to get those doilies to stay down and be really, really secure. I haven't told you what stitch I'm going to use to sew on this doily yet, have I? Well, you're going to be surprised. I'm going to use the button sewing stitch on the Janome CM17. And by the way, I want to say a big thank you to Janome Canada for providing you with this machine so I can demonstrate this to you today. Now, you're going to think it's kind of weird that I'm using a button stitch to put on a doily, right? But there are a few reasons why I like to use it. But before I get into those reasons, let's talk about how to set up the machine so I can use the button feature on it. I have my zigzag or regular needle plate on. It's got that wide opening because my needle is going to go back and forth to form that stitch. And I've got my little button foot on here too. It's a little blue guy that you see here, and it goes on the regular presser foot holder. So it's on there. Now, of course, you also have to choose that from the menu on my screen. So to get to the button feature, you want to go into the sewing application mode. And then you're just going to scroll through, and actually to find it, I find it's easier to use the left arrow because it's only back a couple of pages. There it is. So when you see the button there, you're going to click on it, and you've got a couple of choices there. It's automatically going to regular, but there's also a shank button that you can use too, but we're going to be using that regular one. And the default on it is 3.5. That's the width on it, and that works for most of the things. You'll have to see if it's going to work for your doily or not. So you can always adjust that to make it wider if you need it. The next thing is we need to get the doily going, right? So I've got one of the doilies, one of these kind of bigger ones, and I just want to move things around without disturbing my doily because I actually have it centered, pretty much centered, I would say, on my table runner. Okay, now take a look at your doily. There are right and wrong sides to your doily. This is the right side of my doily. If you look on the back, you can see these lines going along here, these kind of stitching lines. That's the wrong side of your doily. So it may be subtle, but you'll probably notice there's a right and a wrong side to it. So make sure that you get it oriented the right way before you start stitching. Okay, it's not fun to have to take out these stitches if you have it the wrong way. Ask me how I know. Okay, so there's my tip for you, and it's a really helpful one. Now, when I have my doily down here, I want to make sure it's not going to move around too much. And so, well, I want to make sure it doesn't move around at all. So I'm going to do a little bit of gluing. So I've just got an Elmer's glue stick here, water-soluble glue, and I'll put my doily down where I want it to be. I'm just going to move you just a little bit here. I'm trying to get this oriented kind of vertically. And I'm going to flip it back, and there are some areas that are, you know, thicker than others, more solid, if you will. So I'm just putting my glue on there, and I'm just going to press it down. So I'm not putting a lot of glue on. I just want to put enough that it's not going to shift around as I start stitching. Okay. Make sure my glue is coming off there. There we go. All right. There. So that should be, yeah, that's keeping it down there. All right. Glue stick can be really helpful when you're doing these types of projects. All right, so now comes the moment of truth, and we gotta do some stitching. Now, depends on how your doily is formed, where you want to put those stitches. No right or wrong, you just want to put enough of them around there to keep it secure. All right, so you can see that mine goes out and in and out and in. So I will probably put one kind of at the top, at the peak, and probably one in the valley as I go around. I'll continue to do that. So I'm going to orient this because my stitch is going, you know, back and forth here, right? So I'm going to move my thread out of the way here, and that's about my peak. And I like to use, I have this little hand wheel here, little thumb wheel that I can use. You probably can't see it, but it's just underneath where the light is there, where I can place my needle exactly where I want it, okay? And then I'm going to start sewing. Keep your fingers crossed. So you can see as that stitch forms, it goes back and forth, and then it'll go up and down about 4 or 5 times, and it'll go over to the other side. That's where it's going to start its next stitch. So I'm just going to cut my thread at that point in time. Okay, so there we go. And I've got that long tail at the beginning. So when you use your automatic thread cutter, you're going to have some little tails on the back. If it bothers you, you can clip them off. It takes a little bit of time, but it looks tidier, or you can just leave them. Who's going to see the back of your table runner, right? Okay, so I've got that in there. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, so, you know, the stitch is right there, but it is really hard to see, okay? And I will often find I've got to pull it up a bit and go, have I stitched in that area yet or not? All right, and the 3.5 seems to be working pretty well. Here, I'm going to go into a little hole there, actually, in my doily, and then start that stitch. All right, so you just keep moving along here. And again, we're going to go, and you know, you can manipulate your doily around a little bit too if you want to make it look, you know, perfect-ish. Okay, and as I go along, I will often trim my starting thread there before I go on to the next one. It's just easier, I don't have to go back. Okay, and now we're going down into the valley again. And we'll go about here. That looks good. All right, so I would just continue going around, stitching it down, okay? And so when you've finished all your stitching, when you look on the back, let's take a look at the back here, you can see that you've got all the little stitches there, and you can see where I was talking about having these little threads, so you can clip them off if you want, or just leave them. It doesn't really matter. It's up to you. But it's nice and secure, and again, if you're trying to see, where have I stitched? There, I stitched there, and these few stitches here, like, it's really hard to see those stitches. You really can't see them at all, which is great, right? That's the result I was wanting to get, and they're super secure, so I'm not worried about throwing this into the laundry at all. I'm not worried that they're going to come off, that's for sure. So I like the fact that they're decorative. I like the fact that they are very secure. I like the fact that they're no longer sitting in one of my drawers doing nothing, right? So you can have a lot of fun with vintage linens and use them to decorate other items, such as this table runner. And I think it really brings that table runner up a notch for sure. Like, makes it look much more elegant. It's much more interesting, I think, on the table too. And I guarantee you, when you put this on your table and your guests come over, they're going to look at this and go, wow, how did you do that, right? And isn't that what we always hope that they'll say? All right, so that's how you can attach those doilies using the button feature on the Janome CM17. Now, before I let you go today, I just want to say a big thank you to my Patchwork Pals. Those are members in my Patchwork Pals YouTube channel membership, and they support my channel with their monthly subscription. If you're interested in supporting the Chatterbox Quilts YouTube channel, click on the join button you'll find below any of my videos, and you can get all the details. You can even become a Patchwork Pal member today. While I've shown you how to put doilies on a table runner using the button feature on the Janome CM17, you might be wondering how you use it to sew on buttons. Well, don't worry, I've got you covered. Check out this video here, which has all the helpful information that you need. And for more quilting information, be sure to go to my website at www.chatterboxquilts.com.